to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are meeting on, the Wadjuk people. We wish to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of the city and this region.
Thanks, Karina. And hello, everyone. It's great to have you here with us today for this webinar that's around the training and assessor requirements for the registration standards of 2025. So you will have access to a whole range of documents that would have been provided to you via a link. And in that, you'll have a copy of this presentation. You'll have the outcome standards handout, which I want to refer you to a couple of times through the webinar. And you will also have the credential policy and one of the fact sheets there that we will also refer to, because there's a lot more information in there. So as you can imagine, in an hour, we can't go into a lot of detail. So we wanted to provide you with that extra information so that you can actually see that. So the information that we're providing today is for relevant to TAC registered training organisations. At the moment, ASQA and TAC have slightly different implementation timeframes, so we are focusing on TAC RTOs at the moment. So we're going to talk about a number of things today. Firstly, this concept of vet workforce management, what this encompasses and what the implications are for RTOs. We're going to have a look at the qualifications or units that might be required for you to be a trainer and assessor in the vet sector. We'll look at general training and assessment only, under supervision, and we will look at the diploma or higher qualification in adult education or vocational education and training. We're going to also talk about vocational competence and industry currency. And we will also have a look at your responsibility when third parties are involved. So the last thing that we are actually going to ask you to do today is to think about your practice, and it's really that activity is simply around getting you, once you have heard the information that sits in today's webinar, to think about how it might apply to you in your RTOs. So we have an hour, as Karina mentioned. If you've got questions, then you pop them in Mentimeter, and as long as we have time, we'll come back to those. If we don't have time, we have consistent questions, then what we will do is we will answer those in the frequently asked questions that are in the online guidance hub. So let's get started. So effective trainers and assessors are really critical to the vet sector to providing high quality vocational education and training, and they always have been and they always will be. We have got a quality area now that is all about the vet workforce, and that is quality area 3, and that is what you see on the slide that's in front of you. So there are 3 outcome standards that sit in that quality area. 3.1 is really focused on the vet workforce, and this is broader than the trainers and assessors. So we have in the past just had that focus on the trainers and assessors. Now we're looking at other staff who would also support the delivery of services to the students. This might be administrative staff, for example. It might be support staff. And so this standard is about how you manage your whole workforce so that they engage in development that actually helps them deliver the service and perform their roles. 3.2 is really around the trainers and assessors. So this one is focused on the training and assessment competencies that are required, and it includes anyone who might be acting under direction and how we make sure that those trainers and assessors keep up to date with their training and assessment skills and knowledge. And the credential policy that we have now as part of the standards package details all of the arrangements that actually support this standard. And then standard 3.3 is focused on vocational competency and industry currency of the trainers and assessors, and the use of industry experts in the provision of training. So each of these stands are standards that we are going to touch on through our session today. So we'll start with vet workforce management. So this is not a new concept. It won't be a new concept to any of you, but it's now been made explicit in our standards for registered training organisations. All RTOs have really recognised for a long time the importance of having skilled and capable staff to do the job and offer the service. So this standard that we have now, 3.1, actually places formal emphasis on active planning, development, and ongoing support of the vet workforce. And what this does is it actually makes sure that all staff, trainers and assessors, educational leaders, support personnel are not only qualified, but they also have the necessary currency and capability to actually deliver or help support quality outcomes for learners. So in this context, workforce management is a really deliberate and coordinated process, and it underpins and should underpin all of the recruitment, development and retention of staff within your RTO. So this would include strategies to make sure that you have the right size, the right structure and the right expertise in your workforce aligned to what the scale and scope of your delivery profile is and the specific needs of your learner cohort. So effective workforce management encompasses a number of things, and they're the dot points that you see listed on the slide there. And we've also put some information around each of these things in the handout that we've given you. That's on pages 2 and 3 of your handout. So when we are talking about workforce planning, what we're looking at there is that you proactively identify your current and future staffing needs. So this should take into account the industry demands, the regulatory requirements, and sometimes there are additional regulatory requirements that exist in particular industry areas and the learner profiles. So you might take into consideration, for example, do we have enough trainers and assessors for the scale and scope of delivery, and are they actually suited to the needs and backgrounds of your client group? And we all know that not every trainer and assessor is right for every client group. So recruitment and selection is about making sure that those trainers and assessors have the necessary industry experience, they've got the relevant qualifications, including compliance with the credential policies, and that they actually have the ability to engage the diverse learner groups that you deal with. Professional development is about making sure that you have got ongoing opportunities for your trainers and assessors and the rest of your workforce to actually develop their skills through structured learning activities. This could be things like peer mentoring, it might be industry placements, it could be reflective practice. There are many, many ways that you can actually develop your staff. Credential and compliance management. This is about verifying that your staff meet any mandated credential requirements. This could include, for example, holding the Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment, but it could also be other credential or licensing requirements that are relevant for the industry areas that you deliver in or for the staff that might be providing support services. So this would actually include things like you being required to track and update credentials to actually remain compliant with any kind of requirement that you might have. A typical example might be a high-risk license, or it could be a working with children requirement or a police clearance. There are many, many credentials that you would track as an RTO. Appraisal and development is really about regularly looking at your staff's performance and offering feedback and support to maintain high standards of service, whether that be training and assessment or delivery, or whether that be support services. And this really makes sure that you are aligned with industry and regulatory expectations. Succession and career pathways is actually making sure that your staff progress, that there's development, and that you've got a sustainable workforce. And when you do things like this, what happens is you tend to encourage innovation and continuous improvement. And those things are core to the standards that we are about to be working under. And stakeholder collaboration is about actively engaging with industries, learners, regulatory bodies to ensure that whatever workforce development strategies you put in place actually meet the broader workforce and economic needs. So it's not about these things happening by chance. It's about you being proactive and strategic in how you manage the workforce that supports what your RTO actually needs to do. So when you're thinking about what you might do with workforce management, you also need to think about who this might apply to. So this actually covers a really broad range of staff and can reflect very diverse roles required to actually plan, deliver, and assure the quality of training and assessment in your RTO. So obviously the one that pops up most frequently, because we talk about it most frequently, is the trainer and assessor. So these people are your frontline workforce. They deliver the training and they make assessment judgments. So they have to hold particular credentials, they have to maintain industry currency and knowledge, and they have to ensure that delivery meets the needs of the learners and the industry standards. It might also include people like supervisors or coordinators. So these are staff that really oversee the training teams. They provide guidance and quality assurance. They manage delivery within their area of responsibility, and they often act as mentors to less experienced staff. You might be thinking about your compliance and quality assurance personnel. So these are the people who are responsible for monitoring and managing compliance with the standards, including they might manage audits, they might oversee credential records, they might do internal validations or quality reviews. So they have a really important role in your organisation. You could consider learning and development specialists. These are staff who support the trainers and assessors in professional development. So that might include things like mentoring or coaching, identifying training needs, enhancing teaching practices in the organisation. You might also look at curriculum or instructional designers. So some organisations, not all, actually have teams of people who do this writing role within the organisation. So they design and develop training programs and assessment tools that are actually aligned to the training packages. And when you think about all of the changes that are happening with the qualification reform process, these are a group of people that actually do need some development and potentially upskilling at the moment. You have student support staff. That one's very obvious. Administrative enrolment staff. So these are people who manage student records and enrolment processes, and they often maintain the systems to support learners and trainers. So they're incredibly important in your organisation. You might have industry engagement staff or liaison officers who work for you. These are people who build and maintain relationships with employers or industry associations. They're often involved in your industry engagement processes. So again, incredibly important. One that's often not thought about would be your senior management and leadership. You know, leaders who set the strategic direction for the RTO, they often establish workforce development priorities, they ensure continuous improvement across the organisation. And so when you think of the scale of organisations, and this doesn't matter whether you're a single person RTO or whether you're one of the very large TAFE institutions, like together that workforce has got to ensure that the training and assessment is relevant, current and responsive to learners and industry. So when you think about a well-developed workforce management approach, it actually offers significant advantages for a training organisation. It can enhance the quality of training and learner outcomes by ensuring that trainers and assessors are not only qualified, but they're current in their industry and educational practice. It supports compliance with the regulatory standards by maintaining up-to-date records, identifies skill gaps early, and ensures that staffing actually aligns with your delivery scope. Strategically, it enables your organisation to actually anticipate workforce needs based on shifts in industry demand or the learner cohort. It ensures responsiveness and relevance. Operationally, it reduces risk by promoting workforce stability, effective succession planning, and reduced disruptions caused by turnover and staff shortfalls. And this is a significant one for RTOs. So generally, a capable and supported workforce strengthens the RTO's reputation with industry and funding bodies and supports stronger partnerships and market positioning for the RTO. One that I particularly like is this idea that workforce management can actually foster a culture of innovation and continuous improvement, because staff are encouraged to be reflective and to think about new and better ways to do things and adopt new practices or new technologies. So the message is really clear. It has always been implicit. Now it is explicit that workforce management has got really obvious value for you, for your learners, and for your stakeholders. So that first part of Quality Area 3 is saying take a big picture look at how your organisation runs. And then 3.2 brings us to focusing on the trainers and assessors. So this is actually an area of the standards where there have already been some changes. That was March of last year when we had the early changes to the standards, and there's been this ongoing focus on the trainers and assessors in the vet sector that has addressed both capability issues and capacity issues of that workforce. And the changes were really all about doing these things that you see on the screen in front of you. So ensuring that the trainers and assessors have got the knowledge and skills to be effective in a modern vet environment. And that word modern, it's really important there. To reduce pressures on the vet workforce by actually expanding the workforce pool. So this is the capacity issue. And broadening the use of industry experts to provide greater flexibility to the sector, to really impose clear parameters around who can and can't be involved as a trainer and assessor and what needs to be in place for them to do that, to provide clarity on the definition of industry expert and ensure that they have that relevant industry competencies, skills and knowledge, and specialised industry or subject matter expertise. We're going to talk a bit more about that later. To provide clarity on how those with education degrees can actually be engaged as trainers and assessors in the vet sector, and to really look at ensuring consistency on the requirements around skill sets for delivery and for validation. So when we look at 3.2, what 3.2 says is that training and assessment is delivered to vet students by credentialed people with current skills and knowledge in training and assessment. And if you were to have a look at page 1 of your handout, what you will see there is the 3 performance indicators that sit under standard 3.2. So in those 3 performance indicators, what you'll notice is they make reference to the Credential Policy, and that's the document that we actually need to have a look at. So as we're talking about this, I'd like you to be looking at the Credential Policy. Now, the purpose of this policy is that it outlines all of the required credentials for trainers and assessors to make sure that they're appropriately qualified for the roles that they undertake. So it forms part of the standards package that we now have in 2025, and it actually aligns with the outcome standards, as we've just seen, but also some of the compliance requirements. And we should always read these documents as a set or as a pack because they do reference one another. So it's not a standalone document, but it works alongside these standards to actually make sure that we have got consistent high quality training and assessment across our sector. So that credential policy actually addresses 3 areas. It addresses people who are providing training and assessment services. It addresses people who are providing training and assessment from the TAE training package. And it addresses people who are going to be involved in validating assessment. Now, when we have a look at what is sitting in this credential policy, what you're going to find is that there's very little change here past what was already in place from the early changes to the standards that were made in March of last year. But there are a few differences, and we're going to talk to those. So the first part of the credential policy is for all of us who might deliver training and assessment in the sector, with the exception of the TAE training package. So this is for our general trainer and assessment and assessor population. And what this does is it tells us what training and assessment qualification we have to have. And what you'll see in there, this is on page 4 of the credential policy, is that the Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment, there's 3 versions of that you can hold. You can hold the TAE 40110, the TAE 40116, or the TAE 40122. Now, in the past, if you had the TAE 10 qualification, you had to have 2 additional units, the Literacy Language Numeracy unit and the Designing Assessment Tools unit. That requirement to hold the 2 additional units has been removed. So that is the big change there. And of course, in this area, you can also hold a diploma or a higher level qualification in adult education or vocational education and training. And that is the second change. So in the past, we have always had a diploma or higher level qualification in adult education and training. And now that also says all vocational education and training. And we are going to talk about that in a minute. The second part of this policy is about people who conduct assessment only, and there are a number of RTOs that only provide assessment services, that don't provide training services. And again, you'll see on page 4 that you have the list there of qualifications or skill sets that somebody can hold to actually provide assessment only. 1.C, 1C is about people who are actively working towards a credential. And what we've got there is we've got a really clear definition of what actively working towards means. So they've got to be enrolled and have commenced a relevant qualification, which is now the TAE 40122 qualification, or one of the diploma qualifications, and be making satisfactory progress within 2 years. So these people can deliver training and contribute to assessment under the direction of a fully qualified trainer and assessor. So that is someone who meets the requirements of 1A. So what you'll find is that when you have a look at these requirements in here, you really have to look quite carefully and join the dots that exist between all the different parts. So if you are going to deliver under direction in the same way we have had in the past, there has to be some skill in place first before you can do that. And what 1D does is it lists all of those skill sets that you potentially could use to be able to be delivering under the direction of a fully qualified trainer and assessor. So you can see there's actually quite a long list of skill sets that sit there. And what you have to make sure of when you're thinking about that is that whatever credential a person has who's working under direction, that really has to suit the delivery context and the cohort of learners. So, for example, if you had the skill set that's about a young learner delivery skill set, you would have to make sure that that is right for your delivery context and for your cohort of learners. 1E then provides the information about the people who are going to provide direction to the people from 1D. So these people have to hold the certificate for a diploma or a higher qualification or a secondary teaching qualification with that assessor skill set or one of the skill sets added on. They're responsible for oversight of the delivery and contributing to assessment, guidance, and quality assurance when they're actually directing the person who does not have the full credential. So as a concept, what sits in there is not vastly different from what we have done now. There have been a few tweaks and a few additions, and they are the removing of the 2 units from the TAE 10 qualification and the adding of the vocational education and training option for a diploma or higher level qualification. The second area in the credential policy is about people who deliver the TAE training qualification. And there are some stricter requirements that exist for trainers and assessors who deliver the TAE training package. And that's perfectly understandable given that they are training the entire workforce to do the things that we want them to do. So 2.2A is about making sure that the trainers and assessors hold the qualification or skill set at least to the level that they are being delivered. So, for example, if you're delivering a certificate for, or if you're delivering a diploma, then you will hold that level qualification. 2A explains that. So if you're going to deliver from the TAE training package, then you must hold one of the diploma qualifications, and you can see those listed there at 2A, or you'll have a higher level qualification in adult education or vocational education and training. In the same way that for your regular trainer and assessor who could work under direction, if you're delivering from the TAE training package, you also have a possibility that you could work under direction. 2B is the part of the credential policy that actually covers that. And it is making sure, again, that you hold some qualification, which might be one of the certificate 4s, or your secondary teacher qualification with those additional skill sets there. So again, this person can contribute to delivery, and they can also contribute to assessment. When you are providing direction in the TAE training package, you have to hold the relevant qualification to what you are overseeing. And again, you are responsible for the quality assurance, for determining the level of oversight and ensuring the consistency of what has actually been delivered. And of course, remember that the person who is being under direction is not allowed to make assessment decisions. So fundamentally, you'll be making sure that that assessment decision happens. And then once we move to section 3 of the credential policy, you're looking at validation. And again, this is separated into if you're validating a unit from a training package that is not the TAE, and if you're validating a qualification or skill set that comes from the TAE training package. So there are different requirements there. 3.A is for validation of assessment for any other training package other than the TAE, and 3B is for the TAE training package. So depending upon what your RTO delivers, you are going to be looking at the relevant part of this credential policy. So the credential policy does allow for individuals with a secondary teaching education degree who also undertake a skill set to qualify as trainers and assessors. And really what that does is it recognises their prior qualifications and experience. So to meet the requirements of the outcome standards and the credential policy, individuals who present to you with a secondary teaching qualification need to be able to demonstrate the following to actually be a trainer and assessor. So that teaching qualification has got to be a secondary teaching qualification. So it's going to be issued by a higher education provider. And really what we have to make sure of there is that qualification would actually enable that person to satisfy the academic requirements for registration as a secondary school teacher in at least one state or territory. So that person, that's not enough. That person has got to have one of those credentials listed there as well. So they'll have their secondary teaching qualification, and then they will have either the assessor skill set or its successor, or the VET delivered to secondary skills students teacher enhancement skill set or its successor. So we're taking what they already know from the education degree, and then we're adding on VET specific knowledge. And that's not enough either, because like every other trainer and assessor that works in the VET sector, they must also be vocationally competent, at least to the level that they're delivering and assessing, and they have to demonstrate industry currency. So a secondary school teacher, they're able to be registered as a teacher. They have one of the additional the skill sets that they have to teach. They are vocationally competent and they are industry current. So having that current registration as a school teacher isn't mandatory, but they have to demonstrate that they have a qualification that meets the requirements in at least one state or territory. That qualification does not have to be obtained in the state or territory where they're going to provide the training and assessment. So I might have got my teaching qualification in New South Wales, but I want to be a trainer and assessor in Western Australia. As long as that qualification that I've got, that secondary teaching qualification, meets the requirements from one state, then I can, once I've got the other skill sets and vocationally competent and industry current, then I can actually deliver training and assessment. So in Western Australia, the Teachers Registration Board is actually responsible for registration of teachers. And to meet that requirement, a person has to hold a teaching qualification from an accredited initial teacher education program, or one that the Teachers Registration Board of Western Australia actually recognises as equivalent. They don't actually categorise the registration by specialisation, but the standards for RTOs require a secondary education qualification. So only qualifications that specify secondary education are going to meet this credential requirement as specified by the standards. The fact sheet that we have got actually provides a link to the Teachers Registration Board of WA website, and there's a list of qualifications that exist on that website that you would be able to check. There's also another link there, which is a list of qualifications from other Australian higher education providers that also meet these requirements. So our recommendation is, of course, that you access those links and that you check what you are looking at in terms of the credentials that are supplied to you. We often get questions about the secondary teaching qualifications. We've already touched on a couple of these. So individuals don't have to be currently registered as a secondary school teacher, but they must meet those academic requirements. Those academic requirements don't need to be in the state in which they are going to provide the training and assessment service. The changes actually don't enable individuals with overseas teaching qualifications to deliver training and assessment. And that is because of the Higher Education Support Act, which is used as the reference. That Act doesn't recognise overseas qualifications. And when you are looking at a secondary teaching qualification, we don't actually expect you to be in contact with the registration bodies to obtain evidence of someone's eligibility. You could look for evidence like proof of registration or previous registration as a teacher with any Australian Teacher Registration Authority, a teaching qualification from an Australian accredited initial teacher program, a curriculum vitae or statement of employment from a previous or current employer demonstrating previous employment as a secondary school teacher. So there are lots of ways that you could check that this person would meet all of the requirements. So now I want to just talk about the diploma or high level qualification in adult education or vocational education and training. And so what this really means is that, we've had this requirement for a while. So if you've got a qualification that's at an AQF level 5 or higher, which is diploma or higher, then we can consider that qualification as an RTO when we're thinking about whether this person might meet the training and assessment requirements. When it comes to higher education qualifications, these you really need to have a look at what's included in the entry requirements and what the intended outcomes for the course are. There is some information in the Credential Policy that helps you with this, but what's really important is that when you look at that qualification, it doesn't necessarily have to have those words, adult education or vocational education and training in the title, but whatever the units are that are completed within the qualification really need to demonstrate the skills and knowledge required to train adults and teach in the vet sector. So the academic transcript or record of results for a qualification is probably going to provide you that starting evidence to think about this. And we've got a couple of examples to show you. So this one is a graduate certificate in tertiary and adult education, and you can see that there are 12 credit points that this person has to get to achieve to get this qualification. They're going to get 6 from a core unit, which is facilitating lifelong learning, and then they're going to get the other 6 by choosing 2 of the electives that are available to them. And so when you have a look at the titles of these units that the person might complete, they're kind of aligned with what we might expect them to be, but there's not a lot of information there that would actually let you know that this person is about teaching adults and is about working in the vet sector. So you would probably need to go to the actual description of what's in the units of this qualification to actually figure out if it aligned well with what we are looking for in the vet sector. Second example is one of the diplomas in vocational education and training from the TAE training package. So in this diploma, they have to do 12 units. So there's 3 core units, and you can see the 3 core units on the screen there. And then they have to pick 9 electives. And there are 3 specialisations that exist in this qualification. So when we have a look at those 3 core units there, we've got design and develop strategies for training and assessment. That asterisk means that there is a prerequisite for that unit, and that prerequisite is in fact use nationally recognised training products to meet vocational training needs or its previous version. So we know that there is some link definitely there through those units. And then the specialisations are advanced training and assessment, design and development, or vet leadership. So again, depending upon what specialisation the person had chosen, they might have a lot of skill around training and assessment, but it might actually be or have a different focus. So let's say we pick the advanced training and assessment specialisation. And these are the units that you're seeing sitting on the screen now. So these codes tell me that I have got delivery and assessment options available to me, the DEL codes and the ASS codes, and I also have some other options available to me with this specialisation. And like every vet qualification, it's really all about the electives that the person holds. So let's say I chose these electives. So I could establish innovative work environments. I could lead in the development of adult literacy skills. That one's in bold because we're going to come back to it. I could lead and mentor vet teachers, trainers and assessors, and I might apply research to training and assessment practices. So with this choice, probably when you have a look at training and assessment skills that lead the development of adult literacy is probably the one that I would be most interested in and want to have a look at, because it looks very promising that it would help me develop these skills. When you have a look at the unit, it's about advising on literacy demands, advising on literacy skill support needs of learners, advising on literacy skill development, and participating in professional development. So if I came to you as a person who held this qualification with this specialisation and with this choice of electives, the question for you would be, how would you decide whether what we were looking at there did actually meet the requirements of I am appropriately skilled to deliver and assess in the vet sector? So as an RTO, what you really need to do is you need to verify the copies of my credentials, whatever they might be. So it could be a trainer assessor credential of some kind. It could be a USI transcript. It could be an academic transcript if it comes from a university, or a record of results for the units that I have actually had. If it is not obvious, and I don't think either of those previous examples were obvious, when you're unsure, it's always best to check. So you could do this by having a look at the course content or the unit of competency itself to see whether it aligns well with what we're expecting from people. And really, you should detail the process that you've used to establish that it did meet the requirements of the vet sector. And if it didn't, what actions you've taken to actually address the gap, so we can see the outcome of the process that you have gone through. So again, this is not really any different to what we would have asked you to have done in the past. It's just, instead of it just being about adult education, it's also about vocational education and training as well. So it just broadens the scope of what we might look at. So working under direction. So a person who holds the credentials listed in the Credential Policy, this is on page 5 and 6 of the Credential Policy, can provide training and contribute to assessment, provided that they work under the direction of a trainer or assessor. So this section applies if a person doesn't hold the credentials that are listed in 1A, which would actually permit them to deliver training and assessment without direction. But you do have to, as an RTO, make sure that they hold one of the credentials that's listed there. You have got to be able to justify the relevance of that person's credential to the vet cohort that is being delivered to. And of course, someone who holds a secondary teaching qualification must deliver training and conduct assessment under direction as per 1D. To deliver training, conduct assessment without direction, they have to meet the requirements of 1A. The other person who could work under direction is someone who is actively working towards that training and assessment qualification that we mentioned earlier. So they're going to be enrolled in the TAE 40122 or the TAE 5012 and be making satisfactory progress. And what satisfactory progress really entails is going to have to be determined on an individual basis, but that would really involve checking that that person is on track to complete within the 2 years of commencement, and any identified issues with their progress are actually addressed. So, you know, there's a lot of intent in this requirement, and the intention is really to prevent cases where an individual is perpetually working towards a credential without really making any progress. When you are actively working towards the relevant credential, you also must be able to demonstrate vocational competence and remain up to date with industry standards. You have to possess current vet skills and knowledge and continuously enhance all of that through ongoing professional development. So when you think about this is really quite consistent with the existing supervision requirements that are in clause 120 of the standards that we have now. So you're going to need to demonstrate an appropriate level of direction for anyone who is operating in this way, and any conditions or restrictions that you think are necessary for that person based on where they're up to. So this means that, you know, really the level of supervision could evolve as that individual progresses. They might have a lot of supervision and very hands-on supervision or direction when they're very early in the process. And as they're progressing and their skills develop, that might back off a little bit. But whatever that looks like, that is something for you as an RTO to determine and to justify. So you need to ensure that the trainers that provide that direction and monitoring are accountable for the training and assessment that's undertaken by the person who's under their direction. And as we mentioned earlier, 1E of the Credential Policy actually lists the credentials of people who can provide that direction. .3, so now we're back to the outcome standards. 3.3 is about industry skills and currency. And so a registered training organisation really demonstrates that all people are delivering training and assessment for or on behalf of the organisation have industry competencies, skills and knowledge that are relevant to and at least to the level of the training product being delivered or assessed by that person, and that they maintain an understanding of current industry practices relevant to the training and assessment being delivered by that person. So again, these while they're worded in a very different way, they're concepts that are familiar to us. So we also have an option here to involve industry experts in training and assessment. Now, this car or vehicle that you're seeing on the screen is actually a hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicle, and we don't yet have training packages that have units of competency around hydrogen fuel cells electric vehicles in them, but AUSMASA has a project at the moment where they're developing new training products for the DEWR training package for safe handling and maintenance of these FCEV components. So when these training products are endorsed, it's quite likely that RTOs would look to industry experts to actually help support delivery and assessment and to keep up to date with this really rapidly changing technology that's being used. Industry experts in this kind of situation provide incredibly valuable insight into current practices in workplaces, as well as specialised knowledge and skill in new and emerging industries that are going to benefit the learner. The Credential Policy now enables these industry experts to be involved in delivery and assessment. So within Outcome Standard 3.3, it actually talks about where you engage experts for the purposes of delivering training. You do so by reference to the requirements of a training product or a specific vet student cohort. So an example would be these brand new FCEV units. And in response to a specific need for an industry expert to be engaged. Most people don't know about these yet. So the people who are working with them in industry are the ones that do actually understand how these things work and how to maintain them. So the other thing you have to make sure of when you're using these industry experts, that you have a system in place for ensuring that these people do have industry competencies and skills, knowledge, and specialised industry or subject matter expertise that is directly relevant to the training product that they're delivering. So we can't just use them as a spare body. They have to be there for a very specific purpose. Experts are only authorised to work under direction of a person with the appropriate credentials to provide direction on the delivery of training and assessment as specified by the Credential Policy. Where that expert is involved in assessment, they might conduct the assessment alongside a trainer and assessor. So you're putting together an assessment team. And the training and assessment the expert is involved in delivering is subject to oversight by the organisation. So they're not someone that you can just put in there and let them go. You're providing all of the oversight and monitoring and decision making that is required to make sure the quality of the training and assessment is good. So there are some definitions around industry experts. Again, they sit in the Standards and Credential Policy. So an industry expert's an individual who has got relevant specialised industry or subject matter expertise, is engaged by the RTO on the basis of that expertise. Industry experts must have relevant vocational competencies and have current industry skills directly relevant to the training and assessment that is being provided. They can be involved in training and assessment, but only qualified assessors will be able to make assessment judgments and determine learner competency. So again, these people are working under direction. Working under direction of a trainer and assessor means that that industry expert is going to be able to assist fully qualified trainers and assessors to deliver the training and assessment. This language is consistent with previous provisions that we've had in our standards, which actually allowed industry experts to be involved in assessment working alongside the trainer and assessor. Arrangements might include an industry expert providing specialist expertise to actually assist in training or providing specific feedback on a process or observation as part of the assessment process. You have to remember that when you're putting this team together, that trainer assessor that they're working with has got to be fully qualified and meet all of the requirements of our standards. So it allows us to bring in specialists where we need specialists to help make sure that we're meeting all of the industry requirements. So industry competencies, this is really in the past what we have called vocational competency. So this is the broad industry knowledge and experience that's usually combined with a relevant qualification. A person who has industry competencies is going to be familiar with that vocation, the content of that vocation, and is going to have current experience in the industry. They have to be considered on an industry by industry basis and with reference to the guidance materials and the assessment guidelines of the relevant training package. In most situations, trainers and assessors are actually going to hold the qualifications or units of competency that they deliver and assess. But where this isn't the case, the RTO actually needs to demonstrate that that person has industry competencies. So you will achieve that in a very similar fashion to what we have always termed as demonstrating equivalence. You're going to look at the other qualifications that a person might hold, the industry experience that they've had, how the workplace tasks actually align to what's sitting in the unit of competency. That determination is the responsibility of the employing RTO and is subject to audit. So that determination only holds value within the organisation that has granted it. It's not transferable. If that trainer and assessor then goes and works for a different RTO, that different RTO would have to go through that same process to make that determination. And when we are talking about current industry practices, this is making sure that the trainer and assessor understands how that competency connects with other competencies of the learner to actually produce an industry outcome. how competency of the learner relates to the competencies of co-workers to be an effective part of a workplace team, and how that competency relates to and meets the needs of clients in the workplace. So this is a broad understanding across many different applications of the competency in different workplaces. It's not just based on the personal experience of the trainer and assessor, and it needs to be kept up to date through continuing engagement with industry. Understanding current industry practices really means that trainers will be able to enrich the delivery of the unit of competency, and they will be able to provide that real feel of current industry practices, be able to set workplace context in the assessment so that we've got some really reliable inferences about workplace readiness for those learners. Another really important part of these standards, and again, it's always been in our standards, is facilitating access to professional development. It's a critical part of effective workforce management, like we talked about in the beginning of this webinar. So it ensures that staff remain current and capable and confident in their industry expertise and their training and assessment practice. So in the context of the outcome standards, it's not just good practice, it's a regulatory expectation that the RTO effectively manages and supports the capability of their workforce. Like we talked about earlier, professional development really strengthens the quality of training and assessment by keeping trainers and assessors up to date with changes in industry practices, changes in technology, and changes in regulatory requirements. It's really essential in making sure that the students that your RTO graduates are job ready, and it plays a really vital role in building staff engagement and job satisfaction because, let's face it, trainers feel valued and supported and equipped to do their jobs well when they're engaged in development activities. So third-party arrangements is something that we have talked about briefly, or you might have seen the words mentioned or on behalf of. But when we think about all of the obligations for third-party arrangements, the question that we might ask is, when we think about the trainers and assessors, would there be any different arrangements that we would put in place for third-party providers? So we know that the standards talk about the fact that you have to have written agreements in place and that you've got to have enough strategies to monitor. What we are looking at is, in terms of the trainers and assessors, would there be anything different or any different requirement in terms of meeting the training and assessment and vocational requirements of training and assessors? And of course, the answer is no. So when we think about trainers and assessors, it doesn't matter if they work for you. It doesn't matter if they work for someone who is in a third-party arrangement with your organisation. The requirements that they have to meet in regards to the outcome standards and the credential policy are identical. The additional requirement for you is to make sure that you're monitoring that all of those requirements are met. So again, this is an area where there's very little change from the obligation that you have now as an RTO. So we're getting very close to the end. Mel's taking us over to Mentimeter now. Oh, sorry, Karina's taking us over to Mentimeter. And so when you think about the things that we have talked about today and you think about your RTOs, are there any changes or improvements that you would make in your RTOs that are focused on quality area 3, workforce management? So we've got a word cloud sitting in front of us, and if you pop your answers into Mentimeter, we'll be able to see the kinds of things that you're going to focus on. So there's a lot of focus on professional development there, holistic development, management like holistic management of the workforce, new trainers that are coming on board and inductions. looking at industry experts. And when you start to think about the rate of change in industry with technological change, like it is substantial and it is very, very fast. So the workplace is changing dramatically very quickly. So I think the use of industry experts is probably something that, is going to come more frequently. Succession planning is a great one in there. And again, when you start to look at holistic organisational development, succession planning is a core aspect of that. Orientation of new staff in there. So one of the things that's just popped up in there is adequate non-academics. And so the way I'm reading that is that, we have in the past had this overwhelming focus on our trainers and assessors, but really to deliver the service that any and every RTO delivers, there are a whole lot of non-academic staff that are involved in that process. And this holistic look at your workforce to deliver whatever service it is you deliver has to include those non-academics. So that's a really nice one to have in there. Okay. So I think Karina's going to take us back to the last couple of slides now. So the fact sheets that sit around this webinar that we've talked about today, the trainer assessor requirements, and the trainer assessment requirements for delivering the training and assessment training package are going to be available for you, along with those registration standards from the online guidance hub. The vocational competency and industry currency fact sheet is in the process of being approved after it's been updated, and that will be available to you very soon as well using the online guidance hub. We also are very interested in any feedback that you might have about the webinars that we're offering and support that we're offering around the standards. There are also links there to where we're providing further information for you. So we can follow us with our tech talks or follow us on LinkedIn, and the contact information there, as well as a link to the professional development calendar for any other upcoming webinars. And of course, as you know, there's a lot coming with the change in the standards that are happening. So if there's anything that came up for you in terms of questions, again, there's the email address there where you could forward your questions through to TAC so that we can respond to you. And I just would like to thank you very much for joining us today and having a look at the information that we talked about, and know that there's all of that additional information there for you in the policy, and TAC's always at the end of the phone to answer your questions. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you got some useful information, and I will absolutely enjoy my holiday, which I have to sign off with a ciao because I'm on my way to Italy. Thank you. Bye.